What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best builds in Fellowship. With the latest update shaking up the meta with the gem synergies, reworked gear sets, and refined class compositions are changing how Fellowship heroes will dominate the dungeons. No matter if you're focused on healing, tanking, or doing very high DPS, these builds will give you insane power. We will cover everything from the talents, to the gear, to the relics, then even stats and gems, and so much more. Also, if you're interested in buying Fellowship with a 30% discount or even other PC or console games with 50 to 70% off, then check out Instant Gaming. For example, I want to buy Elden Ring, so we just click on Add to Cart, then click Pay, and then finish the purchase. After payment is complete, we will receive an activation key, so copy and paste it in your Steam and it's that simple. Click my link in the description to check out Instant Gaming for yourself. So, Elarion is a ranged DPS powerhouse that is focused on delivering consistent high impact damage from long range. He thrives when keeping a distance from the fight by constantly repositioning while combining in precise shots that build towards devastating numbers. What really defines Elarion is his really good mobility and the option to stay on the move without sacrificing output. Unlike the other ranged heroes who need to stay still for their cast, Elarion can dance through the battlefield, so fire arrows, dodge hits, and never miss a beat. When played well, he is capable of bursting down priority targets like elites and the bosses, while still maintaining very strong AoE potential in the dungeons and raids. Now, like any great hero, Elarion is not without his weaknesses. His ultimate ability, while useful, will not scale as explosively as the others. He also has a tough time investing heavily into defensive talents early on, which makes him feel a little too squishy, and his rotation, especially later on, can become quite complex. That requires good timing and a mechanical awareness to fully optimize. But if you enjoy high-skill DPS numbers, fast-paced combat, and rewarding mastery, then Elarion is definitely for you. So let's take a look at the talents, because this is where Elarion's identity really starts to take the shape. Early on, you'll be focusing on the Hive Arrow build. This setup offers the best all-around performance in the early game, especially before your stats and the secondary synergies will come online. The multi-shot build does scale incredibly well later on, but it can start off weaker and can feel sluggish until your gear supports it. And that's why we start with the Hive Arrow. It's fast, reliable, and powerful right from the beginning. As you level, Elarion's talents will start interacting with each other in fascinating ways. His design allows for multiple viable playstyles, no matter if you want to focus on a pure Hive Arrow build, a more AoE-oriented multi-shot build, or a priority damage-focused barrage build. Elarion has 3 paths to go. You're never locked into just one approach. So here's my progression that I would recommend for every setup to use. At 2 points, we want to take the final crescendo to start amplifying our overall rotation. Then at 3 points, pick up the skyward munitions. With 4 points, go for the lethal shot. Then at 5, you will combine final crescendo, skyward munitions, and the lethal shots together. By 6 points, add in the piercing seekers, and at 7, you will grab the fusillade. From 8 points and onwards, you will expand with the repeating stars, fervent supremacy, and the last lights, and finishing out impending to round off the build. By the time that you hit all 13 points, your full build should include Fusillade, Piercing Seekers, Repeating Stars, Fervent Supremacy, Impending, Last Lights, and the Skyward Munitions. This will be your final endgame setup that offers both single target damage and a solid AoV flexibility. Next up, let's talk about the gear. The best in slot legendary for Elarion is the Master's Astronomer Sabatons. These boots are absolute game changer. They extend the duration of your Starfall volley by 2 seconds. And while the volley is active, each time that you cast the multi-shot, it adds another half a second to the duration. This turns your Starfall volley into a near continuous storm of arrows when played correctly. Then for weapons, your top choice is the Asha's Chrono Shift bow. This bow will grant you an incredible 200% cooldown reduction on all abilities, letting you stay inside your burst windows far more often. It's essentially like pressing the fast forward button on your rotation, so more volleys, more barrages, and more uptime. So overall, this is an absolute monster of a weapon. However, if you haven't acquired it yet, then Void Touch Bow will serve as a solid alternative. But once you get your hands on the Chrono Shift, you must equip it. Then for relics, the best combination is the Sin-Bidding Stone paired with the Ancient Pottery Fetish. Sin-Bidding Stone will provide amazing group utility. It grants you and your allies 15% damage reduction for 15 seconds on a 3-minute cooldown. It is one of the most universally powerful defensive relics in the game. But then on the other hand, the Ancient Pottery Fetish is more of a utility vault card. It lets you literally turn enemies into chickens. It does not work on bosses, but it's incredible for controlling tough dungeon pulls or removing a dangerous elite from the fight. Just remember, that value is diminished if multiple players in your group are also using it, so coordinate with your team. Next up we have our gems, and the gem system in Fellowship is very unique compared to the most RPGs. You'll collect gems that can be socketed into your gear, and as you progress you can fuse them together to create stronger versions. In the early stages though, don't stress too much about min-maxing your gems. It's better to hold off on rerolling low-tier gems and save your currency for upgrading higher-tier ones later in the game. Each piece of gear has a gem power rating, which determines how effective your gems are. So legendary gear, for instance, will give you 100% gem power, while the standard gear only provides around 35%. So you want to prioritize socketing your best gems into your most powerful items. If you're working with tier 1 gems, then you want to focus on the topaz first, then ruby, and then followed by the diamond, then amethyst, then emerald, and lastly the sapphire. You want to do this in this exact order, as this will give you the best performance scaling as you progress. And now finally for the fun part, how to actually play Elarion effectively. So he operates on a builder-spender rotation that revolves around managing focus, which is his primary resource. The focus builds up as you use certain abilities, and you will spend it on your strongest shots and volleys. Your goal is to keep everything on cooldown, so constantly cycling through your abilities in the correct order for maximum uptime. So let's start with a single target rotation for the Heaven Arrow build. You'll open with the Skytrader's Grace, then activate Event Horizon to prime your cooldowns, then apply Lunar Light Mark to boost your damage output. Once that's up, fire off the Starfall Volley to begin your main burst window. After that, move into the Heaven Arrow, then Celestial Shot followed by the Heartseeker's Barrage, and finally the Focus Shot to round out your rotation. And then for AoV fights, the order will slightly shift. You'll start with the Skytrader's Grace, Event Horizon, and the Lunar Light Mark, but you'll prioritize Empowered Multi-Shot early in the rotation, using Heaven Arrow and the Multi-Shot interchangeably depending on the focus and the enemy count, and then wrap it up with the Celestial Shot, Heartseeker Barrage, and the Focus Shots as the finisher. As you transition into a barrage-focused build later in the game, you can simply swap the priority of the Heaven Arrow and the Heartseeker's Barrage. It's an easy change, but makes a big difference in the damage numbers. So as Ardeos, your core identity revolves around the damage over time. Every dot you apply will feed into your main resource loop, so building cinders to fuel detonate. Early on, your cinder generation can feel slow, which is why we build around amplifying fireball and related effects, to keep your output steady while you scale into the late game. The best in slot gear will revolve around items that enhance cooldown uptime and the dot power, so the best weapon is the Ashes Chronoshift Spire. It provides a huge cooldown reduction effect while channeled, and even reduces incoming damage by 50%, which gives you more uptime during burst phases. However, if you don't have that yet, then the Frozen Staff of the Anzir is a strong alternative, which drops icy explosions that debuff enemies and increase their vulnerability to the fire damage. It even synergizes with your Fire Frog procs by tying directly into your kit. For your legendary, we want to go with the Frayed Cloak of the Explosive Potency. This cloak will boost our detonate power significantly and effectively supercharge our burst windows. And then for relics, the best combination will be the Sand-Biting Stone and the Ancient Wardstone. The Sin-Bidding Stone will provide a team-wide 15% damage reduction on a short cooldown, which gives your group a powerful defensive uptime during tough fights. And then the Ancient Wardstone meanwhile will dispel harmful magic effects from your entire party, which can be a lifesaver in certain dungeons or boss mechanics. However, if you're missing those, then solid alternatives can include the Grimoire of Resurrection, which grants a combat res and Ancient Pottery Fetish, which can turn enemies into harmless chickens, which is perfect for disabling a dangerous enemy mid-fight. Next up, let's take a look at our talents, and this path for Ardeos is designed to steadily ramp up our damage, increase our cinder generation, and unlock key synergies that define this fireball build. At the early levels, talents like the Great Balls of Fire and the Flare Up will give your basic fireball casts much more punch and consistency. These are your bread and butter talents by boosting base damage and empowering your dots right from the start. As you move deeper into the tree, you will pick Firestarter or the Rain of Fire, both of which will feed directly into your detonation loop. They make your burns hit harder and shorten your ramp-up time between big bursts. And then later we will grab Crackling Inferno and Intensifying Inferno by stacking even more damage over time multipliers and letting your dots tick faster, which in turn means faster cinder generation. Then once you unlock the slow burn and spontaneous combustion, then the rotation will really start to smooth out, and then the final talents will be the Pyrohebian Frenzy and Intensifying Inferno, as they will tie the whole kit together. This final talent build will maximize our detonation window by scaling damage from all of our dots and rewarding proper timing. By the time that you hit full 13-point setup, your build will feel cohesive, fast-paced, and satisfyingly explosive. Next up we have gear. The best in slot legendary, without a question, is the Frayed Cloak of Explosive Potency. This legendary is all about amplifying your burst windows. It passively increases your explosion damage whenever you trigger a detonation, effectively letting you to double down on your burn phases. It's one of the single biggest multipliers to our total DPS potential. Then the best weapon, as I mentioned earlier, is the Ashes Chrono Shift Spire. This thing is ridiculous, as while channeling, you pulse AoE damage around you, gaining 400% cooldown reduction bonus, and take 50% less incoming damage. It's both an offense and defense at the same time, letting you enter your big burn phases without fear of dying mid-cast. However, the Frozen Staff of the Anzir will serve as an alternative if you don't have this spire yet. It will summon a field of falling icicles, debuffing enemies to take more damage, and occasionally triggering your fire frogs, which fits perfectly with your dot rotation. It's a fun and reactive option that still performs well. Then for relics, we want to use the Sign Binding Stone for the team-wide mitigation, and the Ancient Ward Stone for emergency dispels. If your team lacks a resurrection option, then also the Grimoire of Resurrection is worth slotting in, and Saltwash Elixir is a great personal panic button, as it is a self-heal that restores 40% of your HP instantly. And then finally, the Ancient Poultry Fetish is more of a niche pick, but when used smartly, it can trivialize certain dungeon pulls. Just be sure to coordinate with your group, as it shares a cooldown if multiple players use it. And now finally, let's go into the fun part on how to actually play Ardeos. He will revolve entirely around managing cinders and optimizing detonation. Everything you do will build towards that momentum, so stacking your dots, preparing your cooldowns, and timing your burst so that detonation lands with all the effects active. Ardeos generates cinder through the abilities like the Searing Blaze, Engulfing Flames, Fireball, and Infernal Wave. When you use Detonate, you consume those cinders to deal massive damage based on how many active dots are ticking on your target, which can be up to 4. The remaining duration of those dots doesn't matter, only the number of effects will count. This means the key to maximizing damage is maintaining consistent dots while managing your cinder cap. You never want to overcap. If you're near 4 cinders, then use Detonate immediately to keep the engine running. Then for our big burn, the ideal rotation will look something like this. So open with the Fire Frog, then use the Apocalypse, then followed by the Engulfing Flames and the Pyromania on a secondary target to spread your effects. Then cast the Fireball twice, trigger the Wildfire, and then detonate repeatedly until your cinders are spent. This combo hits incredibly hard and defines your burst window. However, if Apocalypse is not available, then prep by manually applying Searing Blaze across many targets as possible before starting your burn. During the downtime, you want to continue using Infernal Wave to rebuild cinders, and then detonate anytime that you're nearing full. And then our small burn rotation will follow the same logic, just with fewer cooldowns. We use Fireball, then Engulfing Flames, and then detonate until empty. These smaller windows will fill the gap between the big burns and keep your overall damage rolling smoothly. And then finally, when your ultimate, the Incinerate, is ready, it should always be part of your bigger burn sequence. So the flow is use the Fire Frogs, then Apocalypse, then Engulfing Flames, then Pyromania, then the Fireball, then detonate to 0, then Incinerate, then the Wildfire, and then finally just end it by spamming Detonate. Because Pyromania and Wildfire are off the global cooldown, you can combine them instantly for a seamless burst chain. Overall, Tariq is a melee DPS powerhouse who channels the raw energy of the lightning through the furious weapon strikes. His entire playstyle revolves around his swing timer mechanic, and his primary resource the Fury. Now, Fury functions as a built-in spend resource bar, so powering your core abilities. And then on the other hand, the swing timer is represented by a bar next to your character that's constantly moving, showing when your next auto attack will land. When the moving line will hit the end of this bar, your attack will trigger, and that's where the timing becomes everything. The Tariq's heavy strike can be empowered if you activate it right near the end of the bar, but here's the catch: any other ability you press within that final zone will cancel it. So mastering this mechanic, learning when to lock your heavy strikes and when to maintain your fury flows, is what separates a good Tariq from a great one. On top of this, his fury generation can vary depending on your talents, the gear and the uptime. So instead of a strict rotation, you will follow a priority system. You'll generate fury with the core skills, and then decide how to spend it based on the number of enemies you're facing, while adjusting on the fly between single target and AoV fights. So let's take a look at the talents, and we are focusing on the Tariq's lightning specialization. It's the strongest all-around setup by scaling perfectly through every tier of content and synergizing with his key abilities to amplify both the burst and sustained damage. At early levels, you will pick up the Blood Thunder, which is the cornerstone of your lightning kit. It empowers your attacks to trigger electrical bursts and start building that fast, kinetic feel that the Tariq is known for. Then you add Ride the Lightning, which gives your movement and strikes extra chaining potential. From there you will start using Kill Them All and For Beyond Driven, which both of them will feed into your fury generation and the raw output, making your heavy attacks more rewarding and consistent. Then Crack the Sky and the Thunderstruck will supercharge your burst windows by converting your based abilities fully into the lightning damage and allowing your swings to arc through multiple targets. Then by the mid-levels, Mouth for War will bring sustain into the mix by adding a lifesteal benefit that keeps you in the fight, even when things get rough. And finally, as you cap your build with a Spit It Out, you will see everything come together. Your crits will hit harder, your fury generation becomes smoother, and your entire kit feels like a rolling thunderstorm of melee damage. Once you reach the full 13-point setup, you will want to have the Blood Thunder, Thunderstruck, Kill Them All, Mouth for War, Crack the Sky, Ride the Lightning, Far Beyond Driven, and Spit It Out. By using all of this, Tariq will become a kinetic engine of destruction, so every swing will crackle with energy, every leap will detonate into the lightning, and your rotation will feel incredibly powerful. Then, when it comes to gear, your best in slot setup is focusing on maximizing cooldown uptime and empowering your burst windows. The top weapon is the Faithful Basher, and honestly, nothing else comes close to it. It offers a massive amount of cooldown reduction and perfectly complements your lightning-focused playstyle. The faster that you can reset your abilities, the more often you can leap, shock, and demolish everything in your path. If you haven't acquired the Faithful Basher yet, then the Veldstone Crusher is a solid alternative. It's not quite as effective, but it offers a great fury sustain and reliable damage output while you grind for the best in slot weapon. Then for your legendary, you want a Drape of the Slayer King. This cloak is absolutely insane for the Tariq. Whenever you use Leap Smash, enemies hit by the impact will take 20% more damage. Considering how Leap Smash cooldown can get with a haste, this legendary essentially will give you near constant uptime on that debuff, which will amplify all of your damage during burst windows. It is one of those legendaries that feels tailor-made for the Tariq's kit. Every leap, every shockwave, and every follow-up strike will benefit directly. Combine this with the Faithful Basher, and you will find yourself tearing through the enemies at a lightning speed, literally. Next up we have relics, and your go-to relics is the Sin-Bidding Stone and the Ancient Pottery Fetish. The Sin-Bidding Stone will grant a team-wide 15% damage reduction for 15 seconds on a short cooldown. It's an incredible defensive tool, especially during very high damage boss phases. The Pottery Fetish meanwhile is just hilarious and effective. It permanently will turn a non-boss enemy into a chicken. It's perfect for disabling a dangerous elite or erasing a big dungeon pull. If you're missing those, then the Grimoire of Resurrection is a fantastic backup, offering a combat resurrection to bring fallen allies back to the fight. Then Orb of Shadows can also come into clutch, or Sneaky Group Skips, which will grant a party-wide invisibility for 15 seconds. And then other solid picks will include the Ancient Warstone, which dispels all the harmful magic effects from you and your allies. And then the Salt Wash Elixir, which is a strong personal emergency heal that restores 40% of your health instantly. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. As mentioned earlier, the Tariq's gameplay will revolve around managing his swing timer and spending fury efficiently. The trick is to maintain the rhythm, so watching the bar, lining up your heavy strikes at the right moment, and never wasting fury for the overcapping, because fury generation can fluctuate, so Tariq does not follow a strict rotation. Instead, he uses a priority system which will look like this. So your top priorities is the Thunder Call, then the Chain Lightning, then the Leap Smash. then the Wild Swing, then the Face Breaker, and then the Heavy Strike. The Thunder Call is the core of your damage engine. It empowers your spenders to deal lightning damage, chaining between nearby enemies and juicing your AoE potential. Then the Chain Lightning and the Wild Swing will build fury quickly, while the Face Breaker and the Heavy Strike will act as your heavy hitting finishers. Then when it comes to spenders, you've got 3 key abilities: the Hammer Storm, the Skull Crusher, and the Culling Strike. The Hammer Storm is your go-to AoE spender. It's perfect for multiple targets. Then the Skull Crusher is your single target option, ideal for bosses or elites. And then the Culling Strike is your execute, which is a brutal finisher that should only be used when the target's below 30% health. Then outside of this core rotation, you will be combining in cooldowns like the Focus Rat, which buffs your next 2 spenders and lower their fury cost, so always use it on the cooldown. Then your ultimate, the Raging Tempest, will supercharge your Thunder Call for its duration, increasing the lightning damage and stacking expertise up to 20 times, while granting a massive 30% haste boost. This is your signature power-up window, and you should align it with the Leap Smash and your Empowered Thunder Call for the maximum burst. And speaking of the Leap Smash, this ability will deserve a special attention. Because of your legendary, every Leap Smash you will land will apply a 20% damage taken debuff to all the enemies hit. Combine that with the haste reducing its cooldown, and this becomes your top priority button, so always open with it, then use it in every burst window, and never sit on the cooldown.